A young couple of bloggers, obsessed with popularity, turned their own baby into an object of social experiments, calling him an alien and regularly painting him blue for content. However, the innocent game led to shocking consequences. The child was hospitalized with a dangerous allergic reaction that could cost her life. The court case against the parents divided society. SH California v. Carter and Olivia Thompson. Courtroom #12, Superior Court of California, Los Angeles County. Judge, the Honorable Rebecca Lawson. Introduction: True crime or exaggerated panic. The heat of the summer day made the people in the court hall faint, but even more than the temperature, the tension among those present was growing. The judge had not yet appeared, and the courtroom was already packed with journalists, social workers, lawyers, and ordinary citizens who were attracted to the case. The cameras of the television channels were aimed at the defendants who were sitting on the bench for the defendants, trying to appear calm, but their nervous twitches betrayed their true tension. Carter and Olivia Thompson, both 19-year-old bloggers whose lives have become a media storm over the past few months, were awaiting sentencing. A few days ago, their case went viral. The news, social media, and even popular television shows discussed the story. A couple who decided to make a video about their son, creating the image of a little alien, have found themselves at the center of a scandal after their child was taken to hospital with a severe allergic reaction. As it turned out, this was not the first time they experimented with his appearance. This was their content, a way of making money, and now the question before the court was, is this a real crime or just carelessness exaggerated by the media? Several journalists discussed the progress of the case among themselves. "This is just a blatant case," whispered a reporter from a local television company to her colleague. "How can you exploit a child like that?" "Lawyers say that this is a common mistake," answered the other. "Well, the court will decide." Relatives sat behind. Olivia's mother, Mrs. Roberts, clutched her handkerchief nervously, her face pale. She looked tired and devastated. "I don't understand how they could do that," she whispered to her husband. He sighed. "They are just children. But this is not an excuse." Carter and Olivia sat holding hands under the table. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to keep her face still. Carter, on the other hand, looked around the courtroom from time to time, as if looking for allies among the jury or the judge. In the far corner of the courtroom stood Matthew Green, the prosecutor in the case. He calmly flipped through his notes, double-checking the facts. He understood. This case is not just about two bloggers. She will set a precedent. If the Thompsons are not punished, it could be a signal to other bloggers that using children for content without consequences is possible. His aim was to prove that such conduct was criminally negligent. Beside him, attorney Jennifer Klein sipped water from a plastic bottle as she calmly looked through the papers. She knew that her clients were in a difficult situation, and even though they were young and inexperienced, the court should not make decisions based on emotional resonance alone. She intended to prove that their behavior was reckless, but not criminal. Finally, the bailiff's voice rang out. "I ask everyone to stand up." Judge Lawson enters the courtroom. The curtain of this performance rose, and everyone got ready to hear the first words that would determine the further course of events. The start of the legal process. Judge Lawson took her seat behind the tall oak lectern, looked around the courtroom with a keen eye, and opened the case in a clear, balanced voice. "Court is open. State of California v. Carter and Olivia Thompson is pending. I ask the representatives of both parties to speak." Prosecutor Matthew Green rose slowly, pausing for a moment as if to allow the audience to adjust to the gravity of the moment. His dark gray suit was impeccable, and his stern gaze left no room for doubt. He was ready to fight. "Your Honor," he began, putting a note of determination in his voice, "today we are dealing with a matter that goes beyond a simple misunderstanding. We have before us parents who, driven by the desire for fame and popularity, exposed their infant to danger. We will prove that their behavior was not just a mistake, but negligence that could have ended in tragedy." Green walked over to the podium, opened a file folder, and took out a tablet. "Allow me to present the first piece of evidence. the videos that were uploaded to their social media platform. A video appeared on a large screen set up at the side of the courtroom. It shows Olivia holding the baby while Carter slowly paints it blue. "Here is our little newcomer," says Olivia cheerfully on the recording, while the child, not understanding anything, blinks his eyes. "Do you also think that he looks so cute?" A tense silence reigned in the hall. Some jurors frowned, others exchanged glances. Judge Lawson raised her eyebrows curtly, as if the recording only confirmed her earlier assumptions. Green returned to the stand again. "Your Honor, this video material is just one of many. At the time of hospitalization, the child suffered from severe swelling, which made breathing difficult. Instead of immediately asking for help, the parents continued to shoot the content, publishing a post with the question, 'What will happen if our little newcomer tries earthly food?' They joked about their own child, even when it was suffering." The judge slowly turned her gaze to the defense. "Mrs. Klein, you have the floor." Jennifer Klein kept her composure. She knew that first impressions were crucial, and her goal was to steer things back to logic rather than emotion. She calmly stood up, glanced over the jury, and began to speak clearly, without haste. "Your Honor, distinguished jurors, we do not deny that my clients made a mistake. But is it justified to treat their behavior as a crime? They are young, they acted recklessly, but they are not evil or irresponsible parents. My clients truly love their child and did not wish her any harm." She took a step forward, looked at the prosecutor. "Mr. Green gave you the video, but did not explain that most of the content was processed with digital effects. What you see is a visual production that is often taken as a joke by the audience. Social media is not real life, so we have to look at this situation in terms of real intentions." Carter, still sitting intently listening to his lawyer's speech, squeezed Olivia's hand lightly. She too looked alarmed, but Klein continued. "Yes, the child had an allergic reaction, but when it happened, they immediately went to the doctors. There was no intent to harm, no desire to exploit one's own child." She turned to the judge, her voice softer but no less confident. "Your Honor, we ask that you consider this case not as a criminal offense, but as a lesson for all young parents who are still learning responsibility." Judge Lawson tapped her fingertip thoughtfully on the table. "Okay, let's continue listening to the evidence." With these words, she returned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Green, who do you call first?" The prosecutor turned over his notes, and there was tension in the hall, which grew with every minute. Everyone understood the most important part of the process is ahead. Defense position. The courtroom was filled with anticipation. After the powerful introduction of the prosecutor and the demonstration of video recordings, the situation escalated. The jurors, initially neutral, now exchanged worried glances. Many had already drawn their own conclusions, but there were still many arguments ahead. Jennifer Klein stood up, straightened her jacket, and took a deep breath. She knew that she needed to not just protect her clients, but change the mood in the hall. People already viewed the Thompsons through a lens of outrage, and she would have to shatter that image. She slowly approached the rostrum, confidently glancing at the jury. "Dear jurors, dear court, we all agree that child protection is a priority. But before drawing final conclusions, it is important to consider not only the facts, but also the intentions. My clients are not irresponsible or abusive parents. They are young and their actions may have been reckless, but they acted without malicious intent. Today, we are not just talking about social media or blogging. We are talking about a family that has found itself under the influence of the new age of digital content, perhaps without understanding all the implications." She paused to allow her words to settle in the minds of her listeners, and then continued. "My clients were blinded by success. Their blog brought them fame, opportunities, and financial stability. In a world where social media dictates the rules, they believed they were creating something innocent, something that entertained people. They did not realize that they could harm their own son." She walked over to the defense table and put her hand on Olivia's shoulder, who was sitting with her eyes downcast. Carter, next to her, clenched his fingers into a fist. "Let's look at this from another angle," Klein continued, turning to the jury. Imagine that you are 19 years old. You have been given a platform that allows you to earn your living. You've found an audience that supports you and laughs with you. You don't think anything can go wrong. You don't know that your every move is under a microscope. You believe that what you do is simply creativity. Klein raised her hand, pointing to the screen where the video from which the prosecutor made his key argument had stopped. In this video, we see a child painted in blue. We hear laughter. It looks strange to us because we are adults. But does this mean that the parents wished their child harm? Could they have predicted that their son would have a serious allergic reaction? Was it a crime, or was it carelessness that now haunts them? She held another pause, allowing the jury to consider her words. After the accident happened, what did my clients do? They did not ignore the problem. They immediately took the child to the hospital. They cooperated with doctors. They stopped using paints and revised their content. They did not try to hide this incident or avoid responsibility. They are terribly hurt by what happened. Carter let out a heavy breath, head down. Olivia could no longer hold back her tears. "We are not monsters," she suddenly whispered, and although her voice was almost inaudible, this phrase hung in the silence of the hall. Klein leaned slightly towards her, signaling that everything was fine, and then turned to the judge again. "Your Honor, this case should be a lesson for all young parents, but not an excuse to destroy the family. We cannot allow emotions to destroy these people's lives. I ask the court to consider all the circumstances before making a final decision." Judge Lawson tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table as the jury looked away, lost in their own thoughts. The case wasn't over yet, but Klein was able to get everyone thinking. And this was only the beginning of her arguments. Doctor's certificate. The courtroom was filled with intense anticipation. Judge Lawson shifted her gaze from the defense attorney to the prosecutor. "Mr. Green, your next witness." Matthew Green nodded and took a step forward. "Your Honor, I'm calling Dr. Lisa Montgomery, a pediatrician at Children's Hospital Los Angeles." A 45-year-old woman in a strict dark blue suit with neatly styled brown hair came to the podium. She radiated confidence and expertise, her face expressing neither judgment nor sympathy, only professional focus. The jury watched intently as she swore to tell the truth and took her seat. "Dr. Montgomery, would you please tell the court what condition baby Thompson was in when he was taken to the hospital?" Green asked, opening his notebook. The doctor cleared her throat and looked at the jury. "The boy was brought at night, around 3 in the morning. He had severe facial swelling, especially around the eyes and lips. His breathing was difficult. There was a characteristic whistling breath. This is called stridor. This is a classic symptom of an acute allergic reaction known as angioedema." Some of the jurors shuddered at what they heard, and on the dock Olivia hid her face in her hands. Carter stared intently at the table in front of him. "Was this reaction life-threatening?" Green clarified. "Yes," answered the doctor shortly. "Without medical help, the boy could have suffocated. We immediately put him on epinephrine, antihistamines, and corticosteroids to reduce the swelling. After that, his condition gradually stabilized." Green nodded, letting her words settle in the jurors' minds before asking her next question. "Did you conduct any additional examinations?" "Yes, we did a blood test and skin tests for allergens. It turned out that the boy has a pronounced allergy to one of the components of the paint that was applied to his skin." At this point, Judge Lawson leaned forward. "Dr. Montgomery, you said this allergy was serious. Do the tests indicate that this was the child's first contact with the allergen?" The doctor shook her head. "No, Your Honor. The child already had minor reactions to this allergen. This confirms that she was repeatedly exposed to this substance. That is why the reaction was so severe. It was a cumulative effect." There was a muffled sigh in the hall. Green turned to the jury. "So, to be clear, the parents repeatedly applied a substance to their son's body that caused an allergic reaction. The reaction gradually increased until it reached a critical state that put his life in danger." "Exactly," confirmed Dr. Montgomery. The prosecutor paused so that her answer was imprinted in the memory of everyone present. "Have you ever seen similar cases in your practice?" Unfortunately, yes, answered the doctor. But usually such cases occur due to parents' ignorance or accidental contact with an allergen. The fact that the parents deliberately repeated this action is deeply disturbing. The defense stirred. Jennifer Klein slowly stood up. "Let me ask you a few questions," she said, smiling kindly at the doctor. The judge nodded. "Dr. Montgomery, you said that the child gradually developed an allergic reaction. Could my clients have foreseen that the consequences would be so severe?" The doctor endured a pause. "I can't judge their awareness, but if they saw that the child previously had redness or a rash after contact with the paint, they should have paid attention to it and stopped using it." Klein nodded as if agreeing. "But they're not doctors, are they?" she asked. "They are young parents who may not have understood the danger." "It is possible," answered the doctor, "but their imprudence cost the child health." Klein stepped back, pretending she had no more questions. She knew that was enough to cast doubt on the jury, and that was her goal. The judge made a mark in her notes. "The witness may leave the stand." Dr. Montgomery stood up, glancing once more at the defendants. Carter and Olivia didn't look up. Their reality was getting harder, and the judgment they were about to hear was getting closer. Answer by Olivia and Carter. The courtroom fell into deep silence after the doctor's testimony. The tension was almost palpable in the air, and even the muffled clicking of journalists' cameras seemed loud. Judge Lawson put down her pen, looked up, and directed him to the dock. "Miss Klein, do your clients have anything to say?" she asked calmly. Jennifer Klein, the Thompsons' attorney, nodded and turned to Olivia and Carter. Their faces were tense, their eyes full of anxiety. Olivia's hands were clenched nervously, and Carter's jaws clenched, trying to control himself. "Your Honor," Klein began, stepping forward, "my clients wish to speak in person before the court." The judge nodded, indicating that they could begin. Olivia was the first to get up. She took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength, and took a few steps towards the podium. She looked as if only yesterday her life was completely different, but today it turned into a trial where every move and word she made mattered. "I'm so sorry," she began quietly, but confidently. "I don't know if I can find the right words to explain how we feel. We never wanted to hurt our son." Her voice shook, but she continued. "When we started shooting the content, it seemed innocent. We thought we were creating something unique and interesting for people. Everyone in social networks tries to be original to find their audience. We just wanted to show our parenting experience in a fun way." She lowered her head and then looked up at the jury. "But we did not realize that it could harm us. We knew that the child had minor reactions, but we did not think that they could turn into something dangerous. If we could turn back time." Olivia stopped abruptly, trying to hold back tears. Judge Lawson gave her a few seconds, then calmly asked, "When did you realize that your actions caused a threat to the child?" "The night he started breathing hard," Olivia whispered. "We were scared. We immediately took him to the hospital. At that moment, I realized that I had made a terrible mistake." The judge nodded and turned her gaze to Carter. "Would you like to speak as well, Mr. Thompson?" Carter, who had been silent all this time, finally stood up. He looked depressed but determined. He looked at Olivia, took a breath, and spoke. "I know what we did wrong, and maybe many here think that we just want to make excuses. But we are not looking for excuses. We want to tell the truth." He paused, then added, "We did not think that an innocent joke could be the reason for a hospital bed. We did not understand that a small reaction is a warning. We thought it was something minor. We thought it was under control." His voice shook slightly, and he shook his head. "But we were wrong. We are not evil people. We are just young. We thought we understood what we were doing, but we did not understand, and for that we are very ashamed." He took a step back and stared at the floor. There was silence in the courtroom, broken only by the sound of notes being taken by Judge Lawson. After a few seconds, she raised her head. "Do you realize that regardless of your intentions, the consequences of your actions put the child's life at risk?" "Yes," Olivia answered almost inaudibly. "Yes," Carter repeated. The judge made a note in her notebook, and then looked at the prosecutor. "Mr. Green, do you have any questions?" Matthew Green stood up. His voice remained as cold and professional as ever. "Miss Thompson, Mr. Thompson, you said you stopped using paints after that incident. But did you realize before this that your child could have allergies?" Olivia rubbed her hands nervously. We saw that he had rashes before, but we thought it was not serious. Why didn't you go to the doctor at the first symptoms?" clarified the prosecutor. Carter clenched his jaw. "We didn't think it was anything dangerous. We were sure it would pass." Green sighed. "So you saw the warning signs, but ignored them." "We did not ignore it." Olivia burst out suddenly, tears welling up in her eyes. "We just didn't know it was so serious." Green didn't answer, just looked at the judge. She raised her hand to stop the questioning. "That's enough for today," she said calmly. "The trial will continue tomorrow." She hit the hammer, and the hall began to gradually disperse. The Thompsons remained seated, realizing that their judgment was yet to come. Court verdict. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than before. It seems that public interest in the case only grew, and everyone wanted to hear the final decision. The jurors took their seats, their faces serious, some hiding the fatigue from the many hours of trial. Judge Lawson carefully reviewed her notes before beginning the hearing. The defendants Olivia and Carter Thompson were sitting next to each other again, their hands clasped as if one of them might fall out of reality if the other didn't hold on. "The court is open," the bailiff announced loudly. "Your Honor, the floor is yours." Judge Lawson slowly raised her head, looked at the jury, and then turned her gaze to the defendants. She endured a pause that seemed like an eternity to those waiting for a decision. "First of all, I want to remind everyone that this is not only about social networks, not only about young parents who make mistakes. This is a matter of responsibility, of boundaries that cannot be crossed, even in the pursuit of popularity," she began. There was absolute silence in the hall. Everyone wanted to hear the judge's next words. The court carefully listened to the testimony of the parties, considered the evidence provided, and studied the case materials. It was established that the minor son of the defendants was exposed to significant danger due to the reckless actions of his parents. Even though they meant no harm, their carelessness resulted in serious consequences. She paused, looking at the defense attorney. At the same time, the court acknowledges that the defendants are aware of their guilt and made efforts to correct the situation after the incident. Olivia squeezed Carter's hand even tighter. She knew that these words could mean both a chance for a lighter punishment and a reminder of mistakes that could no longer be corrected. In view of the foregoing, the court hereby orders: Olivia and Carter Thompson are found guilty of criminal negligence endangering the life of a child. However, given their cooperation with law enforcement, lack of intent, and genuine remorse, the court orders the following punishment. The judge paused before continuing, as if deliberately emphasizing the importance of each word. The defendants receive a conditional term of 3 years with mandatory supervision of social services. In addition, they are required to take a course on responsible parenthood and be under the regular supervision of guardianship authorities. Any violation of the terms of this decision will lead to a review of the case and possible deprivation of parental rights. There was loud whispering in the hall. Some considered it a too mild punishment, others considered it fair. Olivia covered her face with her hands and Carter lowered his head, exhaling in relief. They avoided jail time, but that didn't mean their troubles were over. Now about the future baby of the Thompsons. The judge took the floor again, covering the noise in the hall. The child remains under the care of the parents, but with regular checks by social workers. They must prove that they are aware of their responsibility and will change their approach to education. She looked directly at Olivia and Carter. "You will get a chance to correct your mistakes, but this chance is not unlimited. If you allow such a situation at least once, the decision will be reviewed, and the consequences will be much more serious. I hope you understand how serious this is." Carter nodded quietly as Olivia wiped away her tears. "At this meeting, I declare it closed," said the judge and struck with a gavel. Movement began in the hall. Journalists immediately rushed to the exit to be the first to report the news. Attorney Klein turned to her clients and said quietly, "It was the best possible result. Now you have to work to prove to everyone that the court was not wrong." Olivia and Carter walked out of the hall holding hands. Ahead of them was a new reality in which they had to correct their own mistakes and prove themselves worthy of the trust of society and, most importantly, of their son. Epilogue. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon as Olivia and Carter Thompson walked out of the courthouse. The journalists' cameras immediately turned in their direction. The microphones went forward and the reporters' voices overlapped. "Olivia, what do you say about the court's decision? Carter, do you think the sentence was fair? How do you plan to prove your responsibility as parents?" Olivia instinctively squeezed Carter's hand, trying not to stop and answer. Carter gave the cameras only a passing glance before lowering his head as he continued to move forward in silence. Behind them, a few paces away, was their lawyer, Jennifer Klein. She stopped in front of a throng of reporters, trying to contain the chaos. "My clients will not comment," she said firmly. "They have a lot to think about." Olivia and Carter got to the car, got in, closed the door, and only then did they let go of each other. Olivia sighed and leaned her forehead against the window. "It's not the end yet, is it?" she asked quietly. Carter shook his head. "No, this is only the beginning." Life after the verdict. The following weeks were a test for the Thompsons. Social services visited them regularly, monitoring how they were taking care of their son. They had to attend courses in responsible parenting, where things were explained to them that previously seemed obvious, but which they so easily ignored. For the first time in a long time, they published almost no new content on social networks. Once their blog brought them popularity, income, attention, but now everything has changed. Each post caused a flurry of comments. "How can you post anything else after all that? You have lost people's trust. It is better to deal with raising a child, not with content." It was painful, but even more painful was the realization that they had indeed made a terrible mistake. One evening, when their son was already asleep, Olivia sat in the kitchen, swirling a cup of tea in her hands. Carter stood by the window, staring into the darkness. "Did you ever think we've gone too far?" she suddenly asked. Carter turned around. "Now I think. But before, we just didn't see it coming." She shook her head. "How could we not see? How could we not understand that we were putting him in danger?" Carter moved closer and put a hand on her shoulder. "We thought it was just a game, that it is not serious, but we were wrong." Olivia closed her eyes. She remembered all those days when they were planning new videos, thinking about how to make something interesting for the audience. They lived in a world of numbers and views, forgetting that their child is not a prop for content, but a living being. "What now?" she asked, opening her eyes. Carter thought for a moment before answering. "We will focus on him. No cameras, without social networks. Let's just be parents." Olivia nodded slowly. "Do you think they will give us a second chance?" Carter squeezed her hand. "We don't need a second chance from others. We need a second chance from him. A new beginning." Several months have passed. The Thompsons have changed. They no longer looked at comments on social networks, planned videos, and searched for ideas for new content. They focused on their son. Social services continued to check, and gradually the level of trust in them increased. A psychologist who worked with them noted that they began to take their role as parents more seriously. It was a long road, but they walked it together. One day, as the social worker was leaving their home after another visit, she stopped at the door and said, "You have really changed. I see that you now understand your responsibility. Your son will be in good hands." Those words were better than any excuse they could come up with. It was an acknowledgement that they were indeed learning. That night, as they put their son to bed, Olivia and Carter stood by his crib, watching him. The baby was sleeping peacefully, his little hands spread out on the blanket. "He's not a newcomer anymore," Olivia said softly, smiling. Carter laughed. "No, he is our son, and we will do everything so that he grows up happy." They turned off the light and left the room, closing the door behind them. There were still many challenges ahead, many trials, but they knew that they would not repeat their mistakes again. They lost a lot, but most importantly, they found a true understanding of what it means to be parents. And what do you think? Was the judge's verdict fair? Write your thoughts in the comments below the video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next crazier thing. Next crazier thing. Next crazy